Welcome back. I'm Hugh Hewitt, Monday through Friday. You hear me on the Salem Radio Network from 6 to 9 a.m. But on Saturday morning, I'm right here on MSNBC. Each week, I ask my panelists for the most important person not named Trump from the week before. This week, I'm joined by Sahil Kapur of Bloomberg, Courtney Kube of NBC News, Elana Schor of Politico, and Eugene Scott of the Washington Post. For me, the person not named Trump who is most important has to be Mike Pompeo. He is promising a new swagger at the Department of State, the helm of which he officially took this week after traveling abroad, first to see our allies, then to Saudi Arabia, then to Israel. And the reason is, not only does he bring the president's confidence, he also comes to a department that has been depleted of senior appointees. He's going to be able to appoint at least 5 of the 6 senior appointments very quickly. And so the Department of State that was Rex Tillerson is quickly going to become Mike Pompeo's. The #1 graduate in his class at West Point is now #1 at Foggy Bottom. I think the impact will be profound and very quick. Sahil Kapur, how about you? Who's your person of the week?
Hugh, I'm going to have to go with Rudy Giuliani here, the president's new lawyer, who seemed to throw a wrench in his legal strategy in a series of interviews that he did that have raised a lot of questions. Firstly, by contradicting the president in terms of his knowledge of a repayment or reimbursement that he made to Michael Cohen, to Stormy Daniels, the adult film actress who the president allegedly had an affair with. He also talked about Michael Cohen, the lawyer who's under criminal investigation in New York, as a fixer of sorts, basically saying, his job was to make this go away. He made it go away, this being the allegation of the affair that she had with Trump before the election. This is going to be very relevant, I think, to prosecutors who are trying to use as much information as they obtained in that raid from Michael Cohen in court. The fact that they have now the president's lawyer saying that he operated more than just a lawyer, more as a fixer, I think is going to be very relevant to them in claiming that they can pierce what the president is claiming as attorney-client privilege between these two.
I'm going to be back around to Rudy in a moment after we go around the horn. Eugene Scott, who is your person of the week not named Trump?
Kanye West.
Oh, surprising.
So as Kanye expressed his support for Donald Trump and conservative ideology, and quite frankly his lack of knowledge about slavery in America and some inaccuracies about what actually happened, it raised a national conversation about history and what so many Americans know and what they don't know, and how race is engaging conservatism to the point where one of Trump's main advisors, Daryl Scott, is proposing a White House summit featuring entertainers and hip-hop artists. And the reason this is so fascinating is because we all know that conservatives have a habit of telling athletes and entertainers to shut up and sing or shut up and...
Now, let's be careful. I am, for example, a huge fan of LeBron James. I want him to give press conference after press conference. Not all conservatives believe that. I just want people to do it not with symbols, but with, like LeBron does, at a press conference so he can explain himself. I hate gestures because you have to interpret gestures. But when LeBron gets out there and talk, I don't agree with him much, but he is certainly making his case effectively.
Well, that's what could happen at a summit if there are more athletes and more entertainers, reminding Americans that they are American citizens as well who have political views and thoughts on issues.
Interesting. Elana?
Well, I had to choose Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and that's because started this week coming on the heels of the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where she has often had this adversarial relationship with the press corps, but she earned a lot of goodwill by sitting up there during this caustic routine and being very calm. Of course, Rudy put her on the spot, by saying what he said, and now you see Sarah really struggling to maintain that credibility she's earned with what she did at the dinner. I think she's been put in a really tough position by the president's lawyer, and it'll be really interesting to see how she operates with a president who honestly serves as his own communications director.
Now, Ron Ziegler, back in the days of Nixon, had a similar position. It's absolutely not winnable. At that dinner, I had the most wonderful dinner companion. I was sitting next to Courtney Kube at the MSNBC table, so we both watched Sarah do her completely fake focused look that was just not going to be moved. Is she on your list or somebody else?
No, all 3 of these are terrific, and of course I feel like I'm always the completely opposite of everyone else because I chose Benjamin Netanyahu as my person of the week, and not so much for what he did. I think people probably think it's because he gave this big presentation where he was showing that Iran, it reminded me of an Apple phone when you being unveiled.
One more thing.
Yes,
and
there's this, and and they had CDs and books and whatnot, but not so much for that presentation, actually, but more for what he did not do this week. And that is that I've been watching for the past couple of weeks how Israel and Iran, the tensions in Syria, have really continued to build and build. Israel has taken several strikes against Iran in Syria. They've taken out taken out some anti-air defense or some air defenses, some surface-to-air missiles. They killed more than 24 Iranian military, including officers, in a strike earlier this week. But there has been a lot of concern in U.S. officials and in the Pentagon that this is going to erupt into a full-on war, including Iran striking back into Israel. That has not happened. There have been some very high-level meetings, including, as you mentioned, Mike Pompeo. He went to Israel. He met with the Israelis this week in his first overseas trip as Secretary of State. General Votel, the head of CENTCOM, was there, despite the fact it's not in his area of responsibility. And Secretary Mattis met with his counterpart several days ago.
Deputy Prime Minister Michael Oren, who used to be Israel's ambassador to the United States, was my guest this week. He's from Israel. He's always a very good guest, and he was very blunt. They will counter any move by Iran, no matter what it means, in Syria, which means we are on the precipice of a war unlike any other that has been since '73, actually. Full on. '82 was big, 2006 was big, but this would be huge. If I can go back to Rudy for just a moment, it seems to me this whole setup, and Sahil, I'll throw this to you first. This whole conversation has been so that Rudy can look a camera in the eye and say, Mr. Special Counsel Mueller, if and when you send a subpoena from the grand jury, we're not going to comply. The president doesn't have to. The Constitution won't make him. That's the only strategy I can interpret here. Have you heard otherwise? Do you think the president is still going to be willing to sit down with the special counsel?
Hugh, what I've heard from people in the president's orbit, people who have worked for him at least, is that they don't know what the strategy is, and it's not clear that many people in the White House were particularly dialed in. The one thing, I agree with you in the sense that, you know, Rudy does seem to represent this more confrontational approach that the president has been moving toward, that people like John Dowd and to an extent Ty Cobb did not want to embrace. This, let's work with them, let's give them what they need, let's not, you know, play games with them, and we can make this investigation end and you'll be fine. I think the president is going in a different direction that reflects, you know, Rudy Giuliani, the hire of Rudy Giuliani and the way he's been speaking lately. But, you know, it's hard to know precisely what the end game is. On Friday, President Trump told reporters on his way to Dallas that, you know, it suggested at least, if not outright asserted, that Giuliani got some of his facts wrong. He said basically he's new to this and he'll get his facts straight, almost throwing his new lawyer under the bus. So it's hard to know what's really going on.
That was a remarkable moment. I do want to remind everyone watching, and our panel already knows this, that no president has ever been successfully subpoenaed to appear in person before a grand jury. Ken Starr subpoenaed Bill Clinton, and Ken Starr's lawyers got that postponed, and then they reached an agreement without the court actually coming to a conclusion. So the big prediction game, and all summer long we're going to be talking about the constitutional side of this and whether or not a president can be subpoenaed. They can't be indicted. That's the general idea. You have to impeach first. But will he sit down? And I want a prediction from each of my colleagues. Do you think, Eugene Scott, that the president is going to sit down with the special counsel?
I think he wants to, and I think that what we have to figure out is he going to win or will his lawyers win? And as of right now, it's not really clear to me.
Elana, what do the people on the Hill suggest to you, and what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I completely agree with Eugene. I think he wants to, but the people around him are telling him, no, this is a bad idea. I mean, for me, what I'm really watching, honestly, is Rosenstein, how Rosenstein affects this entire dynamic, which is a whole nother debate.
And, Courtney, this is way away from your shores at the Pentagon, but do you have any thoughts? Is there any buzz over there?
The Pentagon is staying as far away from everything to do with politics and this as possible. The only thing I would say is that, you know, President Trump has said he will only sit down if he's going to be treated fairly. But what does that mean? It's sort of like negotiating with North Korea. Where are the definition of that?
A quick question. Has anyone been at the White House less than General Mattis, or at least seen there less? He might be there a lot, but he just does not get pictured coming in and out.
He and General Dunford go so far out of their way to stay out of anything political in a way I have never seen. I started covering the military and the Pentagon under Donald Rumsfeld, and I have never seen such an effort to stay out of politics as we have had with this under this administration.
Any early buzz on Bolton and Mattis?
Mattis is really making an effort to get along with him. They have breakfast like about once a week. He's also doing the same with Pompeo already. He's hoping that he forms sort of an alliance there. The two men, you know, they have a very similar view on Iran.
Yes.
You know, General Mattis.
Three men do, right?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, yeah, all three of them. General Mattis is the head of CENTCOM. Iran was one of his main focuses. So they have the potential to get along here, and I know Secretary Mattis himself is making a real effort at that.
And I'd add to that the vice president, who is the quiet man in that accompanies President Trump on foreign affairs also views Iran the same way, so we can imagine that Donald Trump is not going to be staying in that Iran deal, I don't think. I'll be back in a moment for the book roundtable.